A Chinese friend recently told me if you want to become a top manager, you could go to St. Gallen's management school. But if you want to become an entrepreneur, you have to stay here in Asia. 25 years ago, you had to go to America for both. So what has changed? I'm very glad to have you here on Asia Talk in Beijing's Art District 798 Qijiuba. The end of the global financial crisis seems to be in sight, but still many companies and countries face huge problems. However, China and India emerged from the crisis stronger than expected. What did the West do wrong? This question can be answered by our guest who has modernized management theory in the last decades like no one else. Welcome to Beijing, Professor Fredmund Malik. Mr. Malik, are you worried about the West, that the West will stay competitive?
Yes, the situation has changed completely. Everybody knows it. Everybody was shocked, more or less, because nobody expected such a thing, that it could happen at all, not to mention that it was forecasted. I did. I have been doing so for quite some time. It's published. Well, and now we have overwhelming optimism, and everybody thinks it's about over.
Are you optimistic as well?
To me, Mr. Sieren, it's not a matter of being optimistic or pessimistic. I do not like those dichotomies. I try to stay or become realistic in that situation, and I like to have a plan B in case plan A is not going to work out.
So what is your plan B?
Plan B is a basic pattern, to be prepared for a basic pattern which so far has historically never been broken in such a situation, a crisis which has exactly the causes which this one has.
So a crisis like 29?
Yes, but partly so, yes. But from this type of crisis, one can learn that after the first partly collapsing stock exchanges, there was a recovery, a very strong recovery, which brought about again and again this kind of optimism. And then the real storm was about to break out. And if this plays out again this time, we will see. But I would like to be prepared.
How can you prepare yourself for such a crisis?
First of all, one can study these crises, and somehow one can train it. So I personally have somewhat 4 decades of experience at the financial markets with me, and not just the stock market, which is sort of boring in that respect, but the futures markets. And whereas at the stock market, such a thing happens once per lifetime of the average banker, at the futures market it happens 2 or 3 times per year, and so one can practice it.
What did you learn?
One learns to be prepared, one learns to be realistic, and one learns that piling up debt, that's one of the important words, piling up debt never in the end succeeds.
But it worked quite well for America until now.
That is true, it worked for the world more or less, and this is what is rather dangerous, because people then think this is the normal course of things, whereas it is not. It runs sometimes very long, decades, as it was in this case. But then the debt mountains piled up. Silently, people pretended not to know about it, and then they were surprised about it. But of course, one could see with different instruments, by the way. If one looks at with the conventional eyes at the situation, everything is okay and it will go back to normalcy. But if one takes, as I do, the systems point of view, complexity of systems, then one could watch how the inner potentials for destabilization are growing and growing and growing by the minute in the last instances.
So the main goal must be to get rid of the debt? But how?
Oh, of course, yeah, that's the important question. But how?
Do you know the answer?
If it plays out as it did in history, need not to be so, but so far there is not one exception, and it pays to think about that. Well, there are so many bankruptcies until the debt has vanished. Nobody can pay back these debts. Now, some people think we can cure it with an inflation. I don't think so in Plan B. If Plan A works out, we are all happy and we are used to it, and the reflexes work in Plan A, because then we really go back to normalcy as we had experienced before. But if not, then the great question is, no, the great risk is that our reflexes are no longer reliable. So the work is mirrored in a way, and the big risk actually is not what to do, but to understand the real nature of the crisis. And I would like to suggest not just to look at it in economic terms, give you a reason. Practically none of the economists foresaw this storm. So how can they give good advice? They are the best economists, okay? We don't have any better. So the question is it really an economic crisis or something else that goes on? I would like to recommend looking at it in new terms. An old world is vanishing, is dying away, because a new world gets born. And the crisis is sort of the labor pains, so to speak, of this new world getting born.
So what's new?
In this new world, almost everything is new. Some catchwords: complexity. This world has become, due to the successes of conventional management, so immensely complex that practically nobody can really understand it. It's unpredictable, and the crisis proves it. What was thought to be better designed, better under controlled, with less risk than the financial markets, the systemic risk, were thought to be more or less zero. But exactly that system collapsed first. Immense complexity, everything is intertangled, interdependent, interrelated. One cannot predict these kind of systems. They are changing by themselves all the time. That is one point.
But how you want to solve this? The world is getting more and more complex as countries like China, India are emerging.
Yes, it is, and this adds to this complexity, because if you have more or less basically two competitors interplaying, then we have two relationships between Europe and the US and the US and Europe. So this is difficult enough. If there is the entering of a third competitor, it's not just three relationships, but it goes up to six. Between three persons, there can be six relationships. So if we need all our intelligence, let's put it just to 100%, for succeeding in a two-way interaction and competition, we need 3 times as much intelligence to handle the third competitor. And this competitor is largely unknown to us. And so it will need, and this is part and parcel of the new world, completely different instruments, completely different tools, and a new understanding of how this new world will work.
Can you give an example? What will this new tool be?
I can point to the direction I have been looking at with my colleagues and experts in my own company, a Swiss think tank with about 300 experts on these matters, as far as I know, the largest worldwide. We are taking our new models from the living organism. So there is a new science, which is called in Europe bionics, in the Anglo-Saxon word biomimetics. This means learning from nature how she does it. And it's a laboratory, an experimental laboratory, which has been now going on for the last 4 billion years. And so it succeeded quite good. And one can learn a lot. So complexity sciences.
How can you manage this complexity? It's very difficult to imagine.
Yes, but look, in the natural world, early warning systems work very, very well. Sometimes hours before, sometimes even weeks before. immediate changing the mode from a quiet kind of mode into an alarming mode, for instance.
So how do you change a mode in a politician? It's not so easy.
Point, you see. So they are very, very little prepared for that, and it goes very ponderous and very slow, and then there is consensus on the lowest common denominator, whereas we need quite a different. We need to have the largest common numerator, and this is possible with new tools. So what we are actually establishing, and have been doing so for quite a while, so it's proven to work, is establishing the analogons to nervous systems, to real nervous systems and brains for the firm. This is a part of the science of cybernetics, which is one of the complexity sciences. Would go a little bit too much into the details, probably, into technicalities, but I can then give you some examples if you like.
Yes, really. Like.
Well, look, one thing is to get the whole of the system, it's in its entirety on the screens of management. Our organizations are more or less throughout fragmented into all those different functions, marketing and human resources and finance and production and what have you. And then how does one knit that all together to one holistic, unified view of the company within a unified view of the world? That's one point, and this is possible now. As we have it in our cars, technically it's all solved. We have those navigational, satellite-supported navigation systems in our cars. As a matter of course, why not in the boardrooms, you see?
So we basically need a realistic picture of ourselves.
Absolutely. Of ourselves within our environments, with all the competitors present. And it must be a dynamic picture because the world changes all the time. So I need a moving, self-adapting picture, so to speak, which gives me the realistic position second by second, so to speak, in real time. And this gives the next keyword, namely real-time regulation, real-time control. Our economies, not all of them, but many of them are in principle and systematically out of pace with the changes going out in the environment, in the outer world, in the markets. And this is one thing which can be cured and has to be cured. And this gives companies a completely new dimension. It's not just a little bit more of the same. It's a completely new dimension of flexibility, of adaptiveness, of responsiveness, and of real-time control.
China was quite successful during this world economic crisis. They emerged quite early. Did they follow your advice, or what did they do differently than the Western countries?
Maybe they followed their own nose and their own historical advice, I do not know. But it is true that they have at least made not that many mistakes than did in particular the United States. So the origin of the financial part of the crisis is the United States, is the Wall Street industry, and it was exported around the world as a great success, namely by the tool which we call business administration education. So business administration is all okay, we need that too, but it is not sufficient to handle complexity. If you know all about marketing and finance and R&D and so on and so forth, it's all okay. But the question which comes on top of that is, how do these things interplay and interact with each other? This is where the regulatory task comes in. And very many of our organizations, societal organizations too, are short of regulatory power. So I would like to invite people to think in terms of not just the breakdown of the financial system, but the breakdown of the managerial systems we have. It's not just that the blood circulation system broke down, but the nervous system of the organism. And that means different measures.
So you're doing this not only for 3 years, but since about 78 already. You're born in Austria. Then you move to St. Gallen, you open up your own institute, as you were saying, one of the biggest think tanks in the world. It's
in that field, of course. And by the way, what's important to me, sorry to interrupt you, Action Tank. This is all practiced, and this has already been done in enough cases to know what goes about.
It's a Malik Management Center in St. Gallen. But it's quite a bit of work to change the world. So are you quite satisfied? As
long as the world is in a stable state, very self-sufficient and self-complacent with the success, and getting richer by the minute, there is no way of being able to change it. So, but now the world is going to change itself by the very crisis that we have. We will see how it goes about and on. So the task was to prepare for this situation, because now the world has become rather unstable, and now very little energy, very little power, very little force is sufficient to change the direction. And I think this is now the big opportunity for establishing new tools, new instruments, and a new way of thinking.
But the Americans tend not to listen to guys like you from Europe. Why?
They did not listen, but that's past. Now they are listening very carefully, because now, in a very painful way, they have learned that something must be wrong out there. Now they can still bet on the optimistic plan A, so to speak, but then there are enough very experienced entrepreneurs and top executives who at least are able to have these two plans in their minds, and they care to listen in a very attentive way. And this was what I counted with, because as long as they could be convinced that everything is okay and that they are the masters of the world, so to speak, with their know-how, there was no need to do. Now there is.
But you're moving on, and you're focusing on China right now. Is America the past already?
No, I don't. Well, it may well be beyond its culmination, its the height of its role as the world-leading power. And I think the dollar is at the beginning of the end. Its equivalent role too. There are other forces which are coming now into the game. But I mean, America is still a large country, and it's an important country. But then so is China, and it might even be more important in the future. And if only for one reason, because it is unknown as a competitor largely. We do not know the language. We do not know what the interpreters are really interpreting. We do not know to read the body language of the Chinese. We know more or less nothing, which we should know if making strategic decisions, and vice versa.
What do they know about us?
Yeah, that's the next point. It's exactly the same thing. Very, very little. And insofar as this is the case, and I think this is a fact, it is as difficult to cooperate, which is very necessary in the global markets, as it is difficult to compete. So the risks are very, very great of making additional failures. So it need not be so. Maybe we are doing better. We're getting to know each other, but then, as I said, new tools, new ways of arriving at the consensus, for instance, of building up trust, etc., are needed, because this new world will move very, very fast, because it distances itself, so to speak, from the ponderous inertial resources, namely energy and matter, and it moves into the world and the society of knowledge.
But is there already something we can learn from China?
If it plays out like it appears to be at the moment, we can learn to make fewer mistakes than we did. So that is.
But we're in a different stage.
Point. Yes, we are. But then, to me, it appears that China is much more oriented towards the long term, open time horizons, much more patient than we are. Of course, they have their financial centers too, and they imported the US MBA knowledge too, and some are very proud of that and have to think twice now too. But then the country has a different history and a different cultural situation. It is large, everybody knows it. It is very inclined to harmonize and to balance, whereas we in the West, in Europe less so than in the United States, are prone to maximize things just in one dimension, whereas the Chinese appear to me to be very, very able to think in terms of balancing several variables at the same time. And this makes up for a very great difference.
A Chinese friend recently said to me, if you want to become a manager, go to St. Gallen, but if you want to become an entrepreneur, go to China. Do you think in the same way about this?
Not bad, yes, not bad. So if it comes to me, because St. Gallen has various places, he might probably learn both. But if I understand correctly what he meant, yes, St. Gallen has a high reputation for its executive education. And I am not at all on the same lines as the university is, so I established, after having educated at the university for more than 3 decades, I established the extra university organization. But then if he meant that the entrepreneurship in China is in so far easier because the markets are more open, there are more unsatisfied, unsaturated customers, he is certainly correct. If he overcomes all the other hurdles, may pay very well, yes.
But China still has to learn a lot, probably also from Europe. What are the biggest mistakes they are still making?
They still appear to the West sort of not open enough, not cooperative enough. Maybe this is only the outer appearance, but then this counts as a reality too. It is still a matter of mutual trust, not just on the Chinese side, which is rather well known that this is an open question, but how can we trust the Chinese? How do they trust us? These are questions, and they could probably make some steps into that direction, a little bit more convincing, so to speak. Then there is the problem of copyrights, of being copied. There is a great mistrust with regard to that, rightly or wrongly so. That depends on the single individual case. And China, to the Europeans at least, have leaned too much to the American side of role models, so to speak. They are, as far as I can experience it, really not aware of Europe as such. And this may be our mistake too, because Europe is not presenting
Why?
itself.
It's our mistake.
Because we tend to present ourselves not as a unified whole, as the United States do, but as Germany and Italy and Spain and France and Great Britain. And Europe as such is not really on the screen, in particular with the young Chinese. They tend to love our brands, Gucci and Porsche and Mercedes and what have you. But then many of them think that these are American cars and brands, and they know too little about Europe. So I think they should learn much more than they did so far as I could experience it, about Europe. And this means continental Europe. If one says Europe, they mean Great Britain, but continental Europe is quite different. One point is that I would recommend to them, this maybe so far have been a weakness, that they did not develop enough the type of company which we call family-run company.
You all your life was about controlling, about leading things. When you sit down in the evening, are you sometimes worried that the next wave of the crisis will be so big that we can't really control it anymore?
I am worried, yes, for quite a number of companies and executives who are not prepared or who are not willing to prepare and to learn about the situation. Otherwise, history proves that, of course, life goes on, and after grave difficulties, I mean, it always went on. And what one can learn from history is that really large wealth does not come out of good times and of boom times and bull markets. This is like fireworks, you see, but then it collapses as fast as it has been raised. The real wealth come from bad times, from those people who have studied the situations early enough, who are prepared, who have kept their powder dry, and then can profit from the enormous opportunities which present themselves in such a situation. And with respect to that, I'm not worried at all.
So that was quite a hopeful ending. Thank you for having been here, Professor Malik. And don't forget, as the Chinese are saying, 慢走, walk slowly.